and tomorrow's out of sight, and it's sad.
Kris Kristofferson's wife has finally revealed the awful truth that had been hidden for years. Behind the fame and music, there was a side of Kris that not many people have ever seen. Saw one that was sad and in pain. What did she actually find out about the man behind the story? Come with us as we find out what the untold story of Kristofferson, how a rebel artist was made in June 22, 1936, in the small border town of in Brownsville, Texas. A boy was born into a world with strict rules and high standards. He grew up with a strong sense of discipline. A military family with a lot of pride. His duty came before everything else. My dad was a decorated police officer who thought that the only right way for a man to go was by serving the country from at a young age. The boy was asked to follow in the footsteps of his father. There were no questions about how to do it. Life had always been lived in the household was organized and in order. Early wake-ups in the mornings and evenings spent making beds ended with military stories and talks about being patriotic, as his father taught him how to be brave, being responsible and making sacrifices. But as the boy got older, he started to feel he felt a different kind of calling, was love for music that won't go away. And he wrote that he didn't talk about it much, but it was always there when he needed it. Picked up a pencil every time he played a guitar. He wasn't interested in drills or plan was in the melodies and lyrics. He wanted this to cause a deep conflict, to please his dad. But he saw this as his chance to break. It was free, even if only for a short time, such as a scholarship to go to Oxford College in England. It was he and his family saw it as a chance to stepping stone to a high level. He was in the military, but it was more, even more. He met people from all, writing artists, painters and musicians. It was a whole new world, not the same as what he knew in Texas. The air felt more open there. He still felt pressure from home, but he had time to think now. To study, breathe, and make things. He started writing songs at night. He wrote verses that were written in notebooks. Played guitar sometimes in quiet places, performing at small campus events. He let other people hear for the first time the voice he had kept from others. The responses were strong, and people paid attention. They cared, and he started to see that over time, as more than just a young man soldier. But when graduation time came back, his father was waiting for him. His family thought he would join the military and do their jobs with honor like the generations before him from a long time ago. He finally gave up and joined the army. He learned how to fly a helicopter and rose quickly and became his captain. His family was proud that he wore the uniform, carried out his missions with honor, and people looked up to him. From the outside, everything looked fine. It was still quiet inside. His true self calling at night when the bass was after being quiet. He went back to his music. He wrote about the loneliness of his quarters, song lyrics about what he saw and how he felt. The songs made him wish he could be quickly filled with feeling and truth, and wishing no one knew these times were only his. And then there was the turn point in 1965, after years of service. Made a choice that will change all the things he left behind in the military. There was no ceremony or party, he just made a choice. Quit the life he was living. He got ready for the life his father had called for him to take, a path full of not knowing what to do. He chose to chase his want to be a singer-songwriter and artist. This choice was made with a heavy heart. Cost. His family saw it as betrayal. Especially the father was devastated. Ties were cut off. Letters went unanswered, and calls did not get read. He found himself truly alone for the first time, but even though it hurt, he knew he had done the right thing. Choice. He was finally living as his true self. He wrote to himself for a few years after that, playing in small clubs and having a hard time just to stay alive, but his work was honest and it was raw and came from deep inside. A lot of people saw that he had stepped away from his duty to follow his heart. Now everyone would hear what that heart had to say. To talk about trouble in Nashville in 1965 with just a guitar and a stack of written lyrics by hand and a head full of hope. He got to Nashville. He didn't have any money-wise, he didn't have any business friends. He had given up his rank in the military as captain and, most painfully, his family. He was now by himself in a city full of many talented dreamers are after the same thing. Nashville, give something a chance to be heard, wasn't friendly at first. Music Row full of people who want to get there. It was a big break for record labels. The producers were careful, and no one had time for an unknown singer-songwriter who has connections. He saw right away that it wasn't enough for him to want to share his songs. He took any job because he had to first stay alive. He could see that he worked as a studio, a cleaner, mopping and wiping down the floors. He worked in recording booths and also did shifts as an overnight guard at music venues. It wasn't recording studios and such. Beautiful, but it kept him close to the world, and he loved being there. He had to work alone and in silence, which meant could watch, listen, and learn, and that he would write songs when he had time to himself. He would record simple demos from time to time. On borrowed gear after everyone else. He would spend his days after everyone else had left, going door to door with music producers. Most doors, I hoped someone would listen, stayed closed. Some took his demo, and he never called back, but he didn't give up. He really thought what he said. His songs were different from most in style at the time. They were raw and dark and sad. He didn't write just to, he wrote to tell the truth about his really. They were stories of fights and pain, and trying to figure out what it all meant. Some people thought it was very emotional and deep. Strange, some people found it powerful. Almost everyone agreed it was after a moment that will never be forgotten, would become a part of the music legend. Tired of not being cared for and time running out and options, he used to take a brave step. Skills he learned in the military. He hired an airplane and flew to Johnny Cash's house. He landed right in the man's yard and gave him a demo tape. Crazy move, and no one did anything. Johnny Cash didn't brush his teeth like that before. He turned him off, listened, and got it. He heard something in the songs that wasn't just talent, but Johnny knew he had a friend or family member who wasn't trying to fit in, but someone who had real to say. That meeting made him first real chance in the music business. It was a turning point. After years of war, doors finally opened. Wide open, but it was more than a job breaking through. It was a moment of he gave up his old life and wanted to change it. Comfort and left the only name he had ever been taught to follow. Now an important person had cleared his. He no longer felt like a runaway because of art. Thought he was free, but freedom came. It hurt him to record his early songs. After that time, make it clear the lyrics were about feeling alone and guilty. You could feel longing and change. Hear his pain in every word he writes. Didn't try to hide the fact that he missed. He was sure he could talk about parts of his past. Do not go back. These songs were not just, it was music that told the truth. Spooky and full of soul. One by one people began to pay attention to his songs and didn't sound like any other at the time. They stood out in Nashville because they had a lot of deep from his own experience, and even though the trip had been hard, so it gave him something unique and real. The rebel, the artist, was finally heard, and his even though it hurt, the path was finally starting. Break the to look like it was done on purpose. Shape of country music. Once he got his footing, things began to move in the door. He moved quickly, but he didn't just follow his usual route in Nashville. Instead he carved out his own, and writing songs was different from everyone else's at the time. Most back then, country songs were built on simple love stories that end in heartbreak or small. His songs were more about life in the town, looked into loneliness, shame, freedom, and the heavy weight of being human. He was writing about real feelings like a lot of people felt, things they didn't always talk about. He changed more than just his own writing. Country music began to change because of it. It was one of his first major hit was the song Me and Bobby McGee. It was a story about giving up freedom and love that doesn't last. He wrote the song, but it became famous when Janis Joplin recorded it. Not long before she died, her version of #1 on the charts. All of a sudden people all over the US wanted to know who wrote it. Was that made him famous. Then Sunday Morning Coming Down came. John Wayne played it on his It Was a Quiet Haunting on the TV show, a song about being alone when you wake up having a hangover and feeling like life is empty. It wasn't a happy song after the party, but it was real and people saw it. Something they knew about themselves. The words showed a deep sadness that a lot of people had never heard the phrase put into words before. It won the award for Song of the Year and it gets an award from the Country Music Association. Also became one of the most talked about songs of the time. Was another big hit. Was Help Me Get Through the Night. This one wasn't as loud, but it was still bold. Talked openly about what people need, the kind of thing we usually hide. It wasn't about, not about romance, but about wanting to connect. The song was popular, even if it was only for one night. The song was recorded by many artists and became it was a huge hit and won him a Grammy Award. And the praise pushed him even more into the middle of the music world. As more artists recorded his songs, people in the business world had a lot of respect for him. Taken into account a songwriter, someone who said what no one else could. He did more than just write, though. Did his thing, and when he stepped on the at that time it wasn't like most other country singers. Even as his fame grew darker, was getting bigger too. He had always had trouble with depression, loneliness, and addiction. The stress of being successful didn't get rid of those things. They made them even worse. He often felt like he didn't belong, even as the crowds got bigger. And it hurt the same way that drove his songs still lived in him. Fame brought cash and honors, but it didn't bring peace. He said he did more than just make music. Was how he made it through writing, and each singing was a way to stay alive. The song was an admission and a small release of whatever was making him feel down. Records from this time showed that it was clear that there were songs about pain, shame, addiction, and spiritual. When they looked, he didn't hide any of it. Being honest set his work apart, and fans loved it. As his fame grew, people loved him for it. He began to be seen as someone who didn't fit the mold and didn't dress like that. A star didn't act or look like one. He kept telling them to try to be one. He told the truth, which changed what country music could be. The rebellious style went down in history, but in the fight wasn't over yet. From music star to screen icon, after giving it a name himself as an important musician, Kris was drawn to a different world. Acting it began slowly with small parts in movies that didn't get a lot of attention. Splash, but even in those early parts his natural presence was felt by many on. Hide his rough look and deep voice fit well with some kinds of people, especially those who were. This was a new way that was hard and complicated. In order for him to say how he felt. Long got his big break in music, and this is when Hollywood made the movie Pat. When Garrett and Billy the Kid met in 1973 with Sam Peckinpah in charge, the movie was about how the Old West came to an end and the friendship between two well-known criminals. Even though Kris had a small part, his performance was unforgettable, and he brought there is a quiet intensity to the screen that matched the mood of the movie for fans of his music. It was cool to see this new side of him, and Kris thought it was a chance to try out different feelings on stage. But the real turning point came in 1976 with the movie A Star. This movie is a remake of an old story about love, fame, and Kris had a personal struggle and played the John Norman. Howard is a well-known character, a rock star who helps a young singer get noticed to fame while fighting his own demons. It was a great role for him to play. Few people could do what they did with music and acting. In Charge, his performance was rough and so sad that you could see the pain and weariness behind his portrayal of. In the movie, a man tried to charm, stay in love and do well while dealing with addiction and loneliness. Kris knew all too well from his own. It showed up in every part of my life, scene that makes the movie strong, and without a doubt, A Star Is Born was a huge hit. Kris won a Golden Globe for his work on the movie. Award for Best Actor, which showed that he had a lot more to offer than just music. Actor who is ready to take on a major role film and find new ways to connect with viewers. Way the movie's soundtrack with his it was also popular to sing. This putting music and acting together helped solidify his reputation as a man of many talents, the artist who could break the rules. After Kris took on a number of roles in A Star Is Born, a number of parts in various types of movies. They didn't want to play just one. What kind of role he played in dramas, thrillers, and even action movies are one of his most well-known later roles were as Whistler in the Blade TV series that began in those movies in the late 1990s. A tough old man who taught the vampire hunter. Blade played a part that told a whole new generation about him of fans and showed that he could bring adding depth to even the most intense scenes. Making movies became Another important way for Kris to show how he feels, even though music had always been a where he talked about his problems, that he could use the screen in a different way. He could look into things through his characters. New ways to look at pain, hope, anger, and love. This helped him handle the stress of his fame and the problems he faced in his still balancing his music with his personal life as an actor. It wasn't easy to get famous, and there were high costs in both worlds. Constant demands and attention from the public wore him down, but his own fights didn't go away even as he was getting better at in Hollywood. The line between his life and the roles he played blurry, which made it harder for him to find peace. Kris had a lot of different roles in Hollywood, of victory and struggle, but through it all in all, he stayed true to himself. Every chance he had, whether it was on stage or to tell his story and connect with people, with those who needed to hear it. Kris is having trouble with drug abuse. Many times, life was seen through the bright lights of fame, the cheers of fans, and the flash of Hollywood, but the public saw a very different picture of them. Story about battles that not many people know about. Heard or saw the man who sang strong songs and acting with a lot of heart. It was also fighting a constant inner demons that followed him around. Kris went through one of the hardest tests faced was his battle with drugs. As his career took off and his name became well known, the stresses of fame started to make it hard for him to deal with. Stressed, lonely, and in pain, he turned to drugs and alcohol. These drugs helped him dull the pain of the hard times. He tried to hide how he felt from everyone, but they made things worse for him over time. What began as a way to keeping his emotions in check became an addiction that gave him power over his life. The toll of this drug use was real and it was painful and hurt more than just his health, as well as his personal relationships. Kris was married 3 times, and why did the first 2 marriages end? The stress that his drug use and the emotional pain he caused his family. It broke my heart to see these relationships end, which made him feel alone. Losing these connections helped me remember that despite his success, he was still a person on the lookout for peace and stability. Kris had a rough time, but he wasn't afraid to look back and honestly think about the mistakes he made. In talks and interviews, he was honest about the fights he had faced, the hurt he caused other people, and the lessons he learned from being honest. In order to become an adult, he didn't try to grow, to keep his past secret or act like everything was best. Instead, he admitted his flaws and used those lessons to improve yourself. This being self-aware helped his acting and music. It was even more real because it came from in real life, meeting to struggle and grow. Lisa Myers. In the middle of everything in sad times, a new era began when he met Lisa Myers, and she became his 3rd wife, and she was very important. Not played a part in his life before this. Lisa's relationship changed. She a rock during the rough times, a source of strength and stability that Kris hadn't always had before. For the Kris family grew into more than a part of his life. It was a safe place. How much they love and care for. Being a dad gave him a new reason to do not give up and try to stay strong. It wasn't easy to balance fame with family. The demands of his job often took him away. He worked hard to be away from home, gift for his kids, and to build a place where care and love came first. What went on behind the scenes of his fame? A lot of emotional work that couldn't be seen. Kris worked on himself and his people in relationships, trying to make up for the past, to make mistakes and be a husband, and he wanted to be a father and make this push. Needed courage and patience, most of all because he was having trouble with his Lisa's health, and personal demons having been in his life helped him find he felt a peace he hadn't felt before she came along. Had faith in him even when things were tough, and that help kept Kris going. The way they worked together showed that behind every famous person is a private person. A life full of real feelings and struggles. Kris's story has sad parts and happy times. Makes us remember that fame and success often come with secret fights, but it also shows how family and love can be a strong force that can help someone get better and boost the fight against illnesses that can't be seen. Kris in the last few years of his life had to deal with one of the hardest problems, yet not in public or on camera, in his own mind and body. After decades of hard work in movies and music, health problems started to show up, And they changed everything for him and those who loved him. What made these rough times it was especially hard that the illness was hard to see and understand and had the wrong diagnosis at first. When Kris first started to show signs of memory issues, confusion, and trouble. Putting his family and fans first, were shocked. The doctors thought he might have Alzheimer's disease, a terrible news that really shook everyone up. People with Alzheimer's slowly lose their minds. Takes away a person's memories and skills, and hearing about that chance was scary. Kris's family and friends tried to getting ready for what seemed like an inevitable fall, but as time went on, new tests and opinions came in and doctors found out what really caused Kris was having trouble with Lyme disease. Disease is a sickness that ticks spread. Bites, but if it's not treated or is it's hard to find and can lead to serious. Both the body and the brain were hurt. Kris's Lyme disease was very bad. Harm to his mental and physical health. The symptoms were unbearably bad. Tiredness, pain in the joints, headaches, memory loss, and a cloudy head. These symptoms caused everyday tasks are hard for some people, and used to making and performing this was even with these problems, it's still heartbreaking. Kris wouldn't give up, so he kept putting on shows even though his body hurt, and every time he took a step, his mind got tired. It was a strong act of with its strength and courage. Music wasn't just his job, was his medicine and his way of fighting back against getting sick. Lisa, his wife, saw for herself how hard it was.